Hi, everybody. Welcome to Season 5 of Educator Yarns. My name is Jess Staines. I'm the Director of the Career Curriculum, which is an Aboriginal early childhood consultancy that's based on Dark and Young Country on the New South Wales Central Coast. We offer professional development for early childhood educators through webinars, retreats, events, and in-services. This time round on Season 5 of Educator Yarns, I'll be joined by Beck Birch, who's the founder of Kindy's Australia, which is a program that supports educators in enriching opportunities for play and learning in nature for children. Beck has an extensive background in early childhood education. She leads Bush Kindy's Australia, where they take children into nature spaces in all weather, and it gives them the opportunity to play and learn. Beck has experience that spans over many years regarding training and mentoring in nature play, and she's worked in Nature Play Queensland, TAFE New South Wales, and as well previously Cottonwood Learning. So welcome everyone to Season 5 of Educator Yarns, where we'll be mainly focusing on the intersection of nature play and Aboriginal culture and giving advice and hopefully some pearls of wisdom for early childhood educators who are wanting to delve deeper into Aboriginal programs and explore opportunities for rich and meaningful nature play experiences. Before we get into the episode today, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are gathered on and pay my respects to elders both past and present, as well as acknowledging any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander educators who are tuning in. Hi everybody, welcome back to another episode of Educator Yarns. Today I am here with Beck from Bush Kindy's Australia, and we are going to be yarning to you all about bush tucker gardens and the importance of them and how to use them if you have them. So welcome back.
Thank you. Thanks for having me again.
So when we were brainstorming this particular episode, we were sort of connecting over a similar experience that we have when we're visiting some early learning services and delivering our workshops. And a lot of educators, if they do have bush tucker plants within their early learning service, there's a small handful of them who are saying that know what they are, and the rest, they either don't have them or they have them and they're dead or not being utilised at all. And so we began yarning about, well, what message does it send to young children when we have these dead bush tucker gardens, but also what message does it send to community? Because when I go into services and I see that, I kind of feel a little bit like, well, why did you get one in the first place if you weren't going to utilize them or learn about them or care for them? So I guess a good place to start is, why would you want to have a bush tucker garden in your early learning service in the first place? So Beck, what is your why as to why early childhood educators should have bush tucker gardens?
I think there's so many reasons. One of the strong ones I believe in is it really links to that place-based pedagogy, where it gives children and educators to learn about their own local community, what's actually grows in their local community, plants, and also then what wildlife or bugs are attracted. So really linking to learning about their local environment and that real world context of stuff that is important to them and relevant to them because it's in their space and in their community.
That's right. And I think it does open up those green corridors for wildlife. And I know that through lots of different circumstances, like we've had fires in years gone by, like where I'm on the Central Coast, which has annihilated a lot of the natural environments and ecosystems that our furry friends and feathered friends rely upon. And you've just gone through Cyclone Alfred not that long ago. And so there's an impact of that, and wildlife do become displaced and their food sources and so forth. So even if you're in an urban area, having those patches of green within an urban landscape is really important as well. So there's lots of reasons why we would want to create those green corridors. And I think it just is one of the many ways that we can help children to understand what their role as a custodian is, or what it means to be a steward in caring for these spaces as part of their environment. So I hope that that's why educators want to have them. And then there are so many benefits of having a native garden. Do you have a native garden where you live, Beck, like in your own home?
Absolutely. And I wouldn't say a garden, I guess just predominantly there are native plants spread all over my garden spaces. There is what people might term as a bush tucker. My warrigal greens is planted in my veggie garden. I also have some pig face growing in my veggie garden, but it's also out the front in my garden. So I guess it's interdispersed everywhere. And that's what I love to see when I go out into early learning services too, that um, where there's that inclusivity around our native plants or what we might call bush tucker, that it is just everywhere. It's not just one particular little 1 meter square patch over in the corner and that's labeled bush tucker. Like it's great when we have that appreciation of the native plants and all of those traditional uses throughout our whole space. But yeah, I absolutely have it in my home garden. And then because I work on country, I'm surrounded by native plants all of the time. And on our sites, we've got everything from warrigal greens and lemon myrtles and cottonwood and paperbark and yes, so many whatever Dianella with the little berries. Yeah, lots of different things. And so children are able to learn about it very easily when we're out on country because we're surrounded by those native trees and plants. But I know not all early learning centres necessarily have that. If they've been a new centre that's been beautifully landscaped, sometimes it's not always been landscaped with native Australian plants.
Hmm. So I think it's about looking at the different ways that it can take place. And we always say like the best way to connect with country is to go out on country. But then we also know that our early learning services should be a reflection of our local community. So not only
Mm.
is that the peoples, the cultures, the languages, the celebrations, the religions, and so forth, it's also our local ecosystem. So how is that reflected back into your landscaped outdoor early learning environments? And there's an educator, her name is Jen Reed, and she came to one of our retreats that we did through Curriculum last year, and she runs a landscaping company in Melbourne called Urban Discovery. And this is what they do, is that they reclaim outdoor early learning spaces and they take inspiration from the closest local ecosystems and find ways that that can be reflected into their planning of that space and the learning that can happen. And that can be through, like if you're on saltwater country, for example, looking at the rocks and having the pig face and so forth, that you might find having that planted around the sandpit area, or having beautiful dry creek beds if you're in freshwater country that flow, or that your children can use hand pumps and flow through. So I really was quite inspired by the work that she was doing, and thought that it's not just about, planting native to Australia, but planting what's endemic to your area. So when you're going out on country, Beck, you're seeing a lot
Mm.
of the plants that are thriving in your local ecosystems, and that should be a bit of a guide as to what you should plan to be including within your early learning space as well. So that's a reflection of those on country experiences and a way that children can revisit their time on country, even but when they're back within the early learning service.
Absolutely. And sometimes that can take a little bit of researching, investigating about what is local plants in your spaces. And that might be connecting with local nurseries. It might be a parent that is really passionate and has an interest or a job in horticulture. It's also particularly connecting with our community organisations and our elders that might have passions or areas of expertise in that bush tucker. I know for me, I've spent lots of years with Uncle Frank, and that is his passion is like every plant and sharing his knowledge around them. And so I've been really, really fortunate to spend lots of time and learn a lot from him about that.
I feel like as well, like doing your research with children. So when you're taking them
Mm.
out on country, can you take photographs of trees and plants that you're happening across and put them through Google Lens to help Google Lens, like to use that as a tool to identify what it is that you're coming across? I know you have some particular apps as well that you recommend, Beck.
Yeah, we've tried so many, but one of the most successful ones where we actually get accurate feedback is iNaturalist. It's a free app, and you can not only take photos of plants, but also fungi, birds, insects, a whole lot of things in your area. So it's amazing for identifying those. And our children are very much involved in that process. Like they'll come across something and they'll go, "Can we ask the scientists?" And we'll go get the phone and they can take the photos. And, if they're taking it of the tree, they'll take one of the bark and the seed pods and the flower and the leaves and all the different components and upload it. And it's not an instant answer because some of those apps we can get some inaccuracies when it's kind of just trying to work it out through AI. But it's when scientists come back to us with the actual accurate answer of what that plant is called, where it's found. It gives us a whole lot of information and some extra photos. But children can definitely be involved in utilizing that app. And also, even just developing resources. If we're learning about different plants, children can take those photos and then we've made books out of them, so that, it's really relevant to them. They've been involved in that process.
Hi, everyone. I'm just jumping in quickly to remind you all that Beck and I have a series of upcoming events and workshops all throughout Queensland where we'll be yarning about the new ELF principles, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander perspectives, and sustainability. We'll be in Toowoomba, Cairns, the Gold Coast, Brisbane, Mackay, Townsville, you name it, we'll be there. And we hope to see you all there. All right, take care, everyone. Enjoy the episode.
Out on country, we often find plants that children are trying to work out if they are weeds or if they are natives, because we actually don't pick any plants, but if they are weeds, we actually can pick if it's a safe weed to pick. And so, yeah, children have come to us and they're like, "Oh, we found this. It's got some great yellow flowers. Is it a weed?" And so, very much involving them in that whole process of investigating to find out those answers.
Mm. And I feel like I went to a service the other week and they were trying to identify the plants that they had in their pots, like some of which had died, some of which were still alive, and some of which were weeds. And I think
Mm,
it's when you are planting as well, when you're procuring these plants and you're putting them in, doing some sort of a map or plan
mm.
where you're identifying where you're putting what in your garden so that when you do forget that you are able to come back and identify what exactly it is that you've put in that spot or what has died and what has taken its place potentially. So I feel like a few things that we've talked about so far is like the importance of researching and planning. So looking at what's in your local ecosystem, connecting with local community to get their sort of input or local nurseries and so forth, but also the planning in terms of like your actual the space that you have available. So is it in full sun? Is it in shade? Can you put it in the ground? Does it have to be in a pot? Is it going to be in an infants and toddler space or in a preschool space? Is there going to be lots of little hands that are at it all the time? Is it in a high traffic sort of run through area? So really thinking about that when before you just go to the nursery and buy a whole heap of plants and involving children in that process, get them to draw a map of the garden and indicate when it's sunny, like track the sun throughout the day with the children to work out the times of the day, different areas are in full sun or not. Take them out on country, take photos, put them into iNaturalist and Google Lens and research about the plants that you have in your area, get them to identify the different birds that they see flying, within the early learning environment and do some research as to are they seed eating, nectar eating, insect eating birds? What might we need to create a habitat for those particular species to invite them into our space? Um, and then I think the other thing that I believe is important is to start small. Don't get so excited and
Mm.
buy like 100 seedlings of a whole heap of different plants. For me, I would pick plants that are seasonal indicators because I think we get the most use out of them. We can use them for STEM learning experiences as well. But instead of having many, many seedlings, I would opt for like 7 mature plants. My experience with native plants is that, bar a few, most are very slow growing.
Mm.
And if you want to be able to use them in your program, you probably don't want to wait 8 years for them to start producing something. So you're better off with quality over quantity.
Yeah. And I think it's easier for educators to learn about them. I have been in services, they're like, "Oh, we just went and bought 35 plants." And then that was just too big a task for anyone to kind of tackle and learn what they are. Whereas if you're only having like, yeah, 7, 8 plants, staff can kind of get to know them and what plants and be able to identify, and also involving children, like we've mentioned before. I know certainly one of the other programs I was working with children were actually creating the signs because they were involved in that whole process of researching and picking the plants and picking the right spot to plant them. So then they also created signs that then we put where those plants were growing. So they can be involved in that whole process all the way along. But yeah, less plants to start with, and you can always build as the time goes on, but at least it means that children and educators can start to learn about what plants what.
Yep. And I feel like once you have the plants and you've planted them, trying to come into some sort of routine and rhythm, whether that's for the caring of them and who is doing that, how are we making sure that the plants are being cared for? What do the plants need? But also how if we're not having to weed and prune and do all those things, we don't need, and I think this is the thing with a lot of native plants is that they don't need a lot, particularly if they're
No.
from where they're meant to be. So sometimes we can kill them by being too kind, by putting lots of
Yeah.
compost and lots of wormweed and all that sort of stuff. They don't need it. They don't need heaps of
Mm.
watering. They're meant for our climate. So sometimes neglect is like the thing to do. But I
I,
do still think that they need to be visited intentionally, regularly, as part of your rhythm of being outdoors, where you're saying, well, what can we see? What can we hear? What can we feel? What can we smell? And we're noting the changes and we're getting children to observe and reflect on those changes progressively throughout the year. And there has to be some sort of responsibility in that. So, in saying that, we neglect our plants and they do really well and they don't need a whole lot of care and input from us. But then over the Christmas break, we return and after 6 weeks off and they're completely dead. So I do think there needs to be regular checking of the plants, I
yeah.
suppose. Yeah.
And I think a really good one is often we get carried away when we buy plants and we, just put them in the garden and, go, oh yeah, okay, that's the, lemon myrtle and that's on. But every time we buy a plant, there's a little, care instructions tag. We literally need to take a photo of that or take the notes and add it to the back of the sign or store that somewhere in your office so that and I've seen it where it's on the back of the label so that when staff are there watering, they can actually look. And I've seen it where there's been a picture of just like a few raindrops or lots of raindrops. So when children are out there watering with watering cans, they're like, oh, this only has one raindrop. It doesn't like much water. But then these plants over here, they like lots of water. Let's go plant water those ones. So, we get that information when we first purchase a plant. Let's take notice of that, store that information, and make it accessible to children and educators because then we're going to have a better success rate of those plants rather than, someone at the start of the year planted these. I don't even know what it is, and I don't know if I'm just keep watering it every day. Yet it is something that's quite hardy. And like you say, a lot of our natives are hardy. I always love giving the example of the pig face, which is that succulent that grows by the beach. It literally grows on sand in 40-degree heat. It often doesn't have rain. It often has salt water. It doesn't have nice moist soil. It has sand. So, it is very, very hardy, and quite a lot of them are that way. So I think, yeah, taking notice of those care instructions that we kind of get when we first purchase a plant is really helpful.
Have you got questions about nature play, sustainability, or how to meaningfully include Aboriginal culture in your early childhood program? Call 0253 000 306 and leave a voice message for the Educator Yarns podcast. Beck Birch from Bush Kindies Australia and Jessica Staines from the Koori Curriculum will be answering your questions, offering practical advice, cultural guidance, and inspiring ideas to support your teaching and planning. Whether you're just starting out or looking to take your program deeper, your question could shape future episodes and support other educators across the country. Dial in today at 0253 000 306. I don't know where you buy your plants from up your way, but I know in New South Wales, like we have Indigigrow and we have Bush to Bowl, which are two First Nation owned nurseries that are probably about an hour's drive from where I am. And then we also have the Native Wildflower Nursery, which is near me on the coast, and Sustainable Natives, which is on the coast as well. and then we have the Arimba Rainforest Nursery. So they're sort of like a community nursery, but then they grow a lot of the plants that get done for bush rejuvenation and regeneration sort of programs and stuff. So we tend to buy from them. But I mean, I know people love Bunnings, and I'm not anti-Bunnings. I know Bunnings do a lot in terms of giving back to community and so forth, but often it's those community nurseries or Aboriginal specific that will spend a bit more time with you and give you the knowledge that you need. And that's been my
Yeah.
experience that,
Mm.
so I'm about to do a workshop as a participant at our native wildflower nursery on the coast, and it's about birdscaping your garden. So going with a list of birds that we know are here and pictures of our garden, what we have existingly, and getting some recommendations about what more we can be doing to improve that for them. So and you get that when you're looking at community-based nurseries that are around you or First Nation nurseries around you. So thinking about where you would buy your plants from, I think it's important too.
And the other place is local land care groups. Now, different places across Australia, sometimes it's called Dune Care, Coast Care, but they're essentially land care, which is an organisation that works with our councils, and they work to regenerate our areas back to native plants. Now, some of them have nurseries, and they're amazing places to go and tap into because, again, yes, they have that local knowledge that they can impart. They often free or very, very low cost, but they are very, very specific locally. And often they're even locally, um, you know, come straight from the seed. I know our children were involved with land care, and they were actually getting the seeds out of the fruit, planting them in the soil, watching them grow, and land care was supporting them to do that. So very, very local and place-based. So yeah, checking out your land care, coast care, dune care kind of organizations. And your councils often give away free native plants as well. They do in
Council is
Queensland.
great. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
our councils do too. And I think it's like 7 for your own home, but I mean, I don't want to give false information, but I think early learning services can get up to 20 a year or something like that. So, and you can also ask your families, like if they don't want the
Mm.
plants that they're entitled to, like to pass them on to you. Yeah.
And some can grow off cuttings. So there might be parents that have them. Like some of mine, I've passed on to other friends or families just because, a bit of pig face breaks off and it continues to grow. So there are quite a few that may grow off cuttings as well.
And what a great thing to do with children, like for them to then be able to
Mm.
take that home and continue what you're doing at the centre within their own home backyard. I think that's great. Well, thanks, Beck, for all the tips. I think that's a heap of information for people to consider about wanting to start or how to reclaim their native gardens that they have in their early learning service. If you have a bush tucker garden, we'd love to see some pictures of it, and you can post them in our Facebook group, the Career Curriculum Educator Community. If you want to know more about sustainable practices and how they intersect with Aboriginal programs, Beck and I are obviously doing a heap of workshops together. So you can check out either of our websites, Bush Kindy Australia or careercurriculum.com, and you'll see where we are going to be popping up next near you. Thanks everyone for listening. Talk to you again soon. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to today's podcast. To find out more information about the Career Curriculum and how we can best support you in your early learning service, visit www.careercurriculum.com.